Marmalade is just something any Briton abroad, like marmalade will bring you home. Marmalade, tea and toast. That's what I look to when I'm homesick. So.
Hi there, I'm Lan Lamb.
And I'm Joe Gitter.
And we are here at the Test Kitchen with another edition of Ask the Test Kitchen, together but apart.
That's right. If I look that way, I can see Lan and wave at her through a 3-inch thick plexiglass divider. But we are ready to answer your burning questions. So let's get started. Lan, are you going to ask the first one?
Sure am. You ready?
I'm ready.
So, MLTS would like to know, which toaster oven do you prefer? What about Hamilton Beach?
Great. I love that question because I just finished work on a toaster oven book. It was the first book we developed and finished in its entirety remotely away from the office. So it's something that is close to my heart. It's something that I've spent a lot of time on recently and something that I use pretty much every day. So prior to 6 months ago, I never had used a toaster oven in my life. Literally never. And I was a little dismayed to get going with a cooking book on toaster ovens. One would imagine that you're constrained in terms of what you can do with it, but I'm thankful to report I've loved my experience cooking with the toaster oven. And it does matter which one you get. So if you're just using a toaster oven for like making toast or warming up some mac and cheese or soup, it doesn't really matter. Yeah, you could totally use a Hamilton Beach. And Hamilton Beach works fine for that sort of thing. It's not super accurate in terms of temperature control, and also it hasn't got that much space in it. So if you want to use it for something a little bit different, maybe you can roast a whole chicken in it, you really need something excellent, like a Breville Smart Oven Pro. I think that was our winning, but also from memory, the DeLonghi was very good, the Cuisinart was good, Oster did not rate so well, and Hamilton Beach did not do so well. So like I said, if you're just using it for heating things up, great, but if you want to use it for something unexpected, like making steak and asparagus, roasting a chicken, or even making something like a baked ziti, you kind of want something a bit bigger, and you want to go upscale. You want to go for a Breville Smart Oven Pro.
That's
so
what about
you, Lan?
Awesome.
Are you a toaster oven devotee, or are you a snob?
I don't own one. My kitchen is teeny tiny, and I'm actually looking to replace my toaster. We have a very old toaster that toasts very unevenly, so I'll have to do a little bit more research after we wrap this.
Safi Yaf wants to know, how do you get all your garlic and ginger into those amazing pastes? Do you mince? Do you microplane?
Gosh, it depends on what I'm trying to do. If I need that ginger to disappear or that garlic to disappear, or if I want like the garligiest garlic ever out of just a little, out of one clove, I'll microplane. I find it soothing to mince garlic. This sounds so weird, but I did a lot of tiny knife work back in the restaurant days, and it is soothing to me. So I'll dig out like a knife and mince garlic by hand. It just kind of, depends on how much time I have and what I'm using it for. But a microplane, or even just like the finer side of a grater, a box grater, even works great. How do you break down garlic?
Well, garlic, I've got to say, I just use a garlic press because, frankly, I don't have the pride, I think, that you do in your knife work. And if I want some 1/16 of an inch dice of garlic, I know I'm going to come to you. But for me, I'm just going to use my garlic press. But for ginger, on the other hand, you really do need a microplane, in my mind, because you don't want fibrous ginger to be clogging up your teeth. It adds a not particularly nice texture to it. Yeah. Whereas if you use a microplane, it basically, for me, it strips the ginger away. It almost juices it away from the long, fibrous cores that are in ginger. So I like to freeze my ginger, and then when I'm using it, I like to, instead of taking my knob of ginger and rubbing it from the end of it across the microplane, I like to use it crosswise, so that you end up basically shredding the fibers and not clogging them up your holes.
Yeah, it's really important that you orient the ginger in the proper direction. Otherwise, you end up with kind of filling the serrations in your microplane with fibers, and they're impossible to get out. They're so annoying. But if you get the orientation right, it's so easy and it's so fast.
Exactly. Keep your microplane clean.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Okay, Joe. Can you blend veggies and onions for someone that hates to find them in their food? So while we're on the topic of breaking veggies down, how do you feel
Okay.
about blending alliums?
Okay, so as you alluded to in your previous question, the more you cut onion or garlic, any sort of allium, the more pungent it becomes, and that's because a compound called allicin is created. And so if you the difference between a sliced clove of garlic and a minced clove of garlic is enormous. One you get with sliced garlic, you get a mellow, smooth, sweet garlic flavor, and the other you get a strong, pungent garlic flavor that's great for red sauces and the like. So if you do want to blend your veggies from raw, like particularly onions, what you'll find is you'll have a much stronger product than if you were just to chop it up with a knife. So yes, you can do it, but you will get a more intense onion flavor. And I'm thinking this question is probably, if you're making a stew, and some people get a little bit grossed out by the texture of cooked onion. It could be maybe a little slimy, a little wormy, for want of a better word. But frankly, for me, if I didn't want that texture, I'd happily throw in an onion into the food processor, pulse it up a few times, and once it gets to a certain size, it'll just melt into pretty much nothing in the sauce. But like I said, you probably will get a slightly stronger garlic or onion flavor if you do that. What do you think, Lan?
Ooh, I would not advocate for blending. It's
Okay.
On top of what Joe is saying, on top of what you're saying about how it changes the flavor. In my experience, most people who don't like a particular vegetable, they don't like it because they've never had it properly cooked. And so I would say, don't try to force them to like it. Don't try to hide it in the food. Let them come to it in a space where they're not feeling the pressure to like it. Let them kind of experiment with it. Don't, if you're at a friend's house and they happen to be a really great cook and they're serving up, let's say cauliflower, and you hate cauliflower, that might be the time to just give it a taste. Don't commit to it. Just kind of experiment with the different textures and flavors vegetables have. They'll surprise you. Like, find somebody who cooks well, have them cook the vegetable, and try it there, as opposed to trying to sneak it in. I think it's worth it. I am constantly there are a number of vegetables I do not particularly like, but every 6 to 8 months, if I haven't had it, I'll give it a try. And every so often, I find a dish that changes my mind about that vegetable. A recent example would be beets. I don't particularly like beets. A lot of times they're a little too bitter, earthy for me, and the sweetness isn't appealing either. But I had some beautiful beets from Steve Dunn recently, and it was a great salad. So, there's going to be an application where that vegetable is good. You just have to find it. How about you? Any veggies you don't like?
I've got to say, I have a love-hate relationship with parsnips because, I think similar to you, all right, parsnips have two particular characteristics that can be somewhat unappealing, maybe, and the fact that parsnips are very sweet and they're somewhat earthy. And when they're done incorrectly, if they're inadequately seasoned, if they're over mushy, it can just tend to dominate and take over a dish. But then every so often you have a dish that, when it's cooked well, and for me it was a local restaurant that was a parsnip hummus, and it was the sweetness and the earthiness that just combined with the chickpeas was just amazing. And it's just basically taking those flavors or textures that you dislike and either reducing them or masking them or matching them with something you do to create something greater than the sum of the parts. So yeah, I'm a firm believer that you can turn pretty much anything into something delicious, as long as it's edible. So yeah, I'll go with parsnips.
Yeah, you and Brian Roof, you gotta introduce Brian to this dish.
I mean, it sounds like I'm in good company, so I'm not that concerned.
Okay, let's see.
I'm actually noticing a question from 1964-111 that says beets ? And how and what to do with fresh beets. So this seems like a good segue, right?
It is. So Steve Dunn's recipe for beets is fantastic. So things I don't like about beets besides their flavor, they take forever to cook and they're kind of annoying. And Steve kind of solved this problem by peeling them, cutting cutting them into chunks and microwaving them. It's a beautiful way to cook. It's fast, it's easy, you get a really consistent result. But then he seasons them really nicely, and he serves them above a dressing, a number of dressings actually. I think there are a couple of variations, but there are these beautiful salads that are pretty to look at, and the beets are nicely cooked. They're not mushy, they're not crunchy, and the salt actually does a lot for them. It kind of masks some of that earthiness. It makes the sweetness a little bit more palatable to me. It adds some depth instead of just kind of a flat sweetness. So I would say dig up Steve Dunn's beet salad recipes. Did you end up cooking any beets in your toaster ovens?
Not in the toaster oven, because beets in the oven, foil wrapped, which is the standard restaurant way of doing it, is take some beets, maybe put a little oil, a little salt and pepper on them, and then wrap them up and put them in a 400-degree oven until they're tender. And most recipe books tell you 45 minutes to an hour, but no, it takes like an hour and a quarter, hour and a half, sometimes even 2 hours, which is just way too long to cook one component of one dish. So no, we didn't do anything in the toaster oven, but we did do it in the Instant Pot, and I've got to say, they are fantastic. You can take beets, you don't even need to peel them as long as you scrub them, drop them up into chunks, and it's something like, I think I want to say 7 or 8 minutes under pressure, and you get a very similar result to Steve's microwaved versions. So 2 very quick ways of turning tough, fibrous, crunchy beets into something sweet and tender, using the microwave or using the Instant Pot.
Yeah, I'm actually remembering we used to do candied beets as well, and this is
Candied
so
beets?
esoteric. Yeah,
Okay.
we would take really tiny spring freshly dug beets, scrub them, and then slice them really thinly with a microplane, and then just infuse them. You'd simmer them in a sugar syrup, and they're actually really good. We used them as a garnish for, I think, ice cream. It was a dessert application, but surprisingly tasty and gorgeous looking. So, if you want to dabble with beets and want to play with the sweetness, candy them.
Nice, I like that, exactly. So double down on the sweetness, but use the earthiness to somehow sort of temper that and balance it out a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, nice. Sounds great. All right.
Yeah.
Next question. So here we go. Fresh or dried herbs? And this is asked by Grace Houston.
Ooh, depends. I feel bad answering it that way, but the flavor of herbs will change when you dry them. Some of the lighter, more volatile compounds, they fly off as the herbs sit. And what's left behind are kind of a different aspect of those herbs, and sometimes they're exactly what you need. The recipe that comes to mind right now is this lentil soup that's garnished with this oil that you make by microwaving, I think it's microwaving, or maybe you're sauteing butter and dried mint. And it doesn't sound all that appealing. It sounds like fresh mint would be better, but it's lovely. It's not got kind of that, the same mentholy brightness. It's more mellow, it's a little softer, and it's beautiful in this lentil soup. So I think, depends. Follow your recipe. Chances are the person who developed that recipe has put some thought into whether they want kind of that full spectrum that a fresh herb will offer, or maybe just that lower portion that dried herbs offer. Yeah.
No,
How about you?
Completely agree. I mean, I think there are some herbs which dried is just not really even worth it. I'm thinking about basil, parsley, cilantro, even tarragon, chervil, like these sorts of herbs, like when they dry out, all, as you say, like the delicate, volatile flavors that we love in fresh chopped herbs have just dissipated, leaving something dusty and not particularly appealing.
Ooh,
I think I'd add time to that as well. Okay, tell me.
I have to object. Herbe de Provence is made of a lot of the herbs you've named are part of a traditional French herb mix, and
Okay.
so, there's a little space for them. Not in
Okay.
everything, not, but there's I think it's just a different mindset and a different flavor profile you're shooting for.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, like, for instance, oregano. I mean, dried oregano tastes so different from fresh oregano. And sometimes dried oregano is just what we expect. So if you think about, a margarita pizza or an Italian dressing, like that will be made with dried oregano. And if you use fresh, it just has a very different flavor to it. And I love like, the intense savoriness that dried oregano, dried mint give you. And I know it's not really a herb, or in fact, it's not a herb at all, but like lime zest. Lime zest that's fresh is very different from the Iranian dried limes, which it just undergoes such a deep change in the drying process that you deepen some flavors and you lose others. So yes, all right. I think what we're agreeing on is that herbs do change in their fundamental characteristics when they're dried. And if you want to substitute one for the other, you can't always do that. They just give you a different product.
Yeah. Okay. Let's see. While we're talking about interchangeable ingredients, we've got a question from Claire B. Johnson. Are all oils and butter interchangeable when baking? Grapeseed, canola, olive, coconut?
Okay, excellent. Great question. Definitely not interchangeable. And so I mean, there are a few things going on here. So the first is it a saturated or unsaturated fat? Is it solid or is it liquid at room temperature? So unsaturated fats tend to be liquid at room temperature. So things like canola oil, olive oil, grapeseed oil, those are all liquid. Whereas saturated fats, such as coconut oil and butter, tend to be solid at room temperature. And just the fact that they are in a different phase state at room temperature is going to tell you're going to have a different experience in your mouth. So for instance, a muffin made just with butter sounds wonderful, but it'll eat up dry. And that's because you're eating a muffin at room temperature, and therefore the fat is going to be solid at room temperature, and it's not going to be as mouth coating and lubricating, and it won't make your muffins taste as good, which is why you'll find a muffin recipe will nearly always be made with at least some unsaturated fat, with at least some oils. And then on top of that, you also tend to get a few flavor changes. So, olive oil, one in particular, has got a particularly distinctive flavor. And for that reason, we tend not to bake with it. There is a notable exception, olive oil cake, and that's because we want that flavor in there. So I'd say, if a recipe called for canola oil, yeah, you could absolutely exchange it for grapeseed oil or avocado oil. If a recipe calls for butter and you want to substitute that out, we've had great success in the vegan book, because I've worked on a vegan book and a plant-based book. We had great success substituting coconut oil. Coconut oil doesn't have any liquid, any moisture content in it like butter does. Butter's 80 to 85% fat and 10 to 15% moisture, water. So we found, you can pretty much exchange coconut oil for butter, 1-for-1, but you might just want to add a little bit of extra moisture, a little bit of extra liquid. I don't know if you'd add anything to that, Lan.
No, I don't think so. I think you've covered it. There are obvious examples where you can't make that substitution, say if you're creaming butter and sugar together for a cake or a cookie. But even when it's not obvious, making a simple swap in baking they're never simple, and it's best to follow the recipe or be prepared to do a little bit of experimenting.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with that. The one thing I feel very confident in saying is you can exchange or you can substitute avocado oil for canola oil. So a lot of people are worried about industrial seed oils and therefore don't like to consume them. I'll say, if you don't want to consume canola oil and your recipe calls for it, you could absolutely use a refined avocado oil.
Oh, gosh, Joe, I found the perfect question for you. This one's from Cordova Hill, and they would like to know, British steamed pudding, is it a custard or a bread pudding?
It's a perfect question for me. Okay, very good. It's neither, not at all. So in England, pudding really means two things. It can either mean dessert, you can simply say, what's for pudding, and you're asking what's for dessert, or a pudding can refer to a traditional steamed pudding. And by that I mean, it's generally a sponge, and then it's normally put in some sort of porcelain vessel, and then it's put in a big steaming vessel, and it's steamed until done. So the most famous example for that would be Christmas pudding. So that's nearly always steamed. Other ones are marmalade pudding, sort of similar structure to the Christmas pudding, but there's a lot of marmalade in it without the dried fruits and nuts. That's very good. And spotted dick, which lots of people find funny as a name, but it is just a traditional pudding where it's a white sponge that's studded with currants or raisins. I don't particularly like them. They're very old-fashioned, but that's what they are.
Joe, have you had Andrea Geary's marmalade pudding?
I have not had her marmalade. Is this a published recipe for Cooks Illustrated?
I don't think it is. Oh, gosh. So we need to get on this. Andrea's got a recipe from back in her restaurant days, and she's like brought in a mold and made it maybe once or twice back when we were in Brookline, and it is so good. It was my introduction to British puddings.
Okay, that sounds really, really good. I mean, marmalade is just something. Any Briton abroad, like marmalade will bring you home. Marmalade, tea, and toast. That's what I look to when I'm homesick. So her steamed pudding sounds great. Have you got any of those things that just remind you of home, whether your parents or a place or?
Gosh, kinda. There are certainly smells that bring me to my grandmother's cooking, and. Like I remember when I was young, she was teaching me how to make scrambled eggs, and the way she made scrambled eggs, we would crack a couple of eggs into a bowl, add a couple dashes of fish sauce instead of seasoning with salt, and looking back, I now understand the science of why her eggs were so good. But a little bit of fish sauce, a little bit of water, and all of that liquid and the salt tenderizes the curds. She would heat up a skillet, add kind of a generous amount of oil, and then all of that mixing was done with chopsticks. So you take the dirty chopsticks and just dip them into the oil, and when you knew the oil was ready, when the tiny bit of egg stuck on the tips of your chopsticks would kind of blossom in the hot fat.
Bloom is like a flower or something, yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like this tiny little explosion of egg, and so when the oil was hot, you dump the egg in, and then you would use the chopsticks to kind of push the curds as they formed. And the goal was to leave a slick of oil between the eggs and the pan, so there was no sticking. And you'd get these billowy, fluffy, folded curds. And then turn off the heat, flip the eggs onto a plate, and we'd have that with rice, and that would just be like a really easy lunch. And so that aroma and the sounds of the egg cooking kind of take me home.
That sounds so good. It sounds like I can just imagine it being such a distinctive smell, like the smell of egg hitting hot fat with the fish sauce as well cooking. So, and it's probably something that you don't smell very often. Like, have you ever like glimpsed a whiff of it somewhere and thinking like, oh my goodness, that takes you back there, or is it just like nothing else you've had?
No, I mean, I'll make that when I need a quick meal. Like I've always got random pickles hanging out in the fridge, and so it'll be like a little bit of kimchi, and like it's not a ton of fish sauce. It's not there's just like this whiff of hot oil and like egg. It smells homey to me.
That sounds wonderful. Yeah, actually, I take scrambled eggs. Scrambled eggs just do it for me. They're so comforting and warming, and it feels like children food. And I wish my son ate scrambled eggs, and he could have that same experience, be able to look back warmly with a tender heart to some tender scrambled eggs.
Maybe you should teach him how to make them. I think a lot of kids are more into trying new foods if their hands are involved from start to finish.
Yeah, I just want to. Extending homeschooling is not on my agenda at the moment.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Okay, all right. Let's have another question. Have you cooked catfish before?
I've eaten catfish before. Have I cooked catfish before? Not recently, certainly.
I've got a question. We might not know the answer to this then. All right, so I definitely don't know the answer to this. How do you get that dirt/mud taste to go away when cooking catfish?
I grew up with catfish in a number of Vietnamese dishes where it's paired with some strong flavors. I don't recall having catfish on its own kind of in something delicate, but like if you've got like a braised catfish with kind of burnt sugar and fish sauce, you don't really. The fish is kind of there as a protein. It's meaty. It doesn't fall apart. It's easy to cook. You can't overcook it, but it's not fishy. Oh, and like there's a lot of black pepper in there too. So I would say pair it with something that's really intensely flavored, so that that kind of earthiness isn't as apparent.
Right. Or maybe like the beets or the pepper or the parsnips, we're using like its earthiness, it's as a seasoning in its own right, and as long as it's matched up by something strong enough, garlicky or fishy or salty enough or fermented enough, it's going to actually make the dish better rather than worse, I guess.
Yeah. I think finding using it in a context that it was meant for, finding a cuisine that takes advantage of those flavors is probably a good way to start. Okay, here's a good one. What can you coat chicken with prior to frying that's not eggs? This is for someone with an egg allergy.
Okay, very good. So the first thing that comes to mind was from the vegan book, and so obviously looking to a vegan book to answer a question on how to cook chicken is a slightly curious one, but I'll have a go anyway. This was cauliflower, let me think, crispy cauliflower bites. And what we did was we took cauliflower, we coated it with a mixture of coconut milk and a little flour, whipped it together, and then used that to coat the cauliflower, and then we could dip that in breadcrumbs. And that worked tremendously well. It does have quite a strong coconut flavor, but it adheres very well and gives you a very nice consistency. So if you're doing a dish where the flavor of coconut might actually be appreciated, you could try that. Other than that, I would imagine taking a little milk and whisking in a little flour you might have some luck with that. I don't know. Have you got any thoughts on that?
Gosh, I went all science on this. So I think the reason people use egg is it's sticky, right? And so if you can't use egg, you need to find something that is sticky and that will that it's got a soft flavor that will kind of be hidden. One way to do this is maybe a combo of mayo and mustard. You might need to thin it out with a little bit of water, but that would be my instinct. Just or maybe just mayo or just mustard. Nope, you can't use mayo. Allergic to eggs. So mustard and
vegan mayo. What about vegan mayo?
Vegan mayo would work. So I think you just need to grab a brush something that's a little bit sticky with a mild flavor, or with a flavor that goes with your breading and your chicken. And you might not get the same coverage that you would get with egg, but it'd probably be pretty close. The other trick would be, after you've breaded your chicken, let it hang out for 20 minutes and let that bread kind of give it some time to stick. And you'll get a better breaded product for it.
Nice. And I think flour can only help you there as well, right? Which presumably, if you're breading something, you're probably going to be dipping it in flour after your egg or your egg substitute as well. Yeah. So it sounds like we have run out of time. So I think we might have time for, what should we do? One more, two more? All right, let's do it.
Well, you pick one.
All right, let's do it. Okay, healthiest cream sauce that is delicious. Let's get some lamb deliciousness into this broadcast.
Oh, that's tricky. Healthiest cream sauce that's delicious. I don't know how you would define healthiest.
I want easy, delicious, healthy.
I say splurge. Don't have your cream sauce once a week. Have it once every 2 months and just go for it. How about you?
I like it. I I worked on the keto book, and my wife also likes to follow the keto diet, so I have some experience of this. So there's some people who would not be regarding a cream source as unhealthy, in fact, quite the opposite. So it's incredibly healthy because it gives you an enormous amount of fat, it's dairy, so there's high in calcium, and a lot of other good antioxidants and vitamins in it as well. So first of all, you can just get onto the bandwagon that cream is healthy. And in terms of making it easy, I love to just heat up cream, and then you can throw it into a blender with some grated cheese, maybe Parm, Pecorino, or even cheddar and Manchego, and you just whisk it up into this delicious, creamy, cheesy sauce. So it's healthy, it's easy, and it's delicious. So I'm going to give you all three of them.
I thought of something. There's a really easy dressing / sauce you can make using cashews. And you soak the cashews in hot water, blend them, and it's really actually pretty easy to make cashew cream, and you can substitute it for regular cream in a handful of recipes. If only I could remember what they were off the top of my head, but look for it on the Cook's Illustrated website. There are recipes for a creamy, creamless dressing that's cashew based, and I think a couple of how-tos about other ways you can substitute cashew cream, which is really easy to make.
Perfect. Yeah, I've got to say, I love using cashews as a cream substitute. On the vegan book, we use that technique quite a lot. It was Andrew Geary's, if I remember correctly. We made a really good vegan cacio e pepe, basically doing something along those lines. You need a blender, 15 minutes, and then some cashews.
Perfect.
So it has been a real pleasure, Lan. So I think we might be the first time doing an Ask ATK in the office, but separated, socially distanced. It's been a pleasure.
This has been great. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Thank you very much.